Tonight, important dates to note in the lead-up to the general elections. Niue High Court dismisses Niska's case against BCN and 2 others. Good evening, I'm Sarai Mangawa and this is your BCN News. Leading our news tonight, one new case of COVID-19 was detected yesterday, 5th of April, according to the report from the Health Department. The total number of cases recorded since March 2022 last year is 798. Government and health officials have also announced last week that the travel restrictions for all passengers to Niue have been lifted effective immediately. Here's more on this story. According to the latest travel advisory issued last Thursday, 30th of March, the Health Department announced all travel restrictions have been lifted effective immediately. This means that all travelers to Niue are no longer required to complete a Niue Traveller Declaration form. All travelers are not required to be fully vaccinated for COVID-19. All travelers are not required to provide evidence of adequate travel insurance. However, it is still highly recommended. Effective from the 1st of April 2023, all travelers to Niue are encouraged to undertake self-administered rapid antigen tests or RATs on day 1 and day 3 after arrival in Niue. Effective immediately, the isolation period for positive COVID-19 cases shall be a minimum of 5 days. For more COVID information, visit the Niue government website www.covid19.gov.nu. The call for nominations for the general elections is now open and it will cost $200 to submit the nomination of a candidate. For those who will be vying for one of the 20 seats in the Whanokepule, BCN News will detail the remuneration package for members of parliament. Meanwhile, the Chief Electoral Officer, Darren Tohovaka, was on radio yesterday morning to explain some of the key information that the public should be mindful of in the lead-up to the general elections on Saturday, the 29th of April. He explains here some of the key dates.
Some of our key dates, Thursday, 13th of April at 12 p.m, so that's next week. That's when nominations close for all candidates for the village Member of Parliament seats and the Common Role Member of Parliament seats. On Tuesday the 18th of April, our electoral rolls will close. And on Monday the 24th of April, we have voting in advance. So there will be just a one-day voting in advance. So those of you who are jumping on a plane who want to vote and are eligible to vote, and have registered to vote, make sure you get to the department before the plane leaves and vote. So we just want to ensure that people are aware of that. And obviously on the 29th we have our voting or polling day. And on Monday the 1st of May, that's when the official results are declared. I just want to go back, Esther, to Tuesday the 18th of April when the electoral rolls are closed. Just want to let voters or electors know to bring your registration forms in early. There is a process around determining whether you're eligible and can be registered to vote, and it takes some time, so please make sure that you get onto that as soon as you can.
According to the Chief Electoral Officer, Darren Tohovaka, the increase of the nomination fee had been discussed for many years. When compared to candidate nomination fees from other Pacific countries, Niue's previous fee of $11 was very low, hence the decision to increase it to $200. So, for those vying to be a Member of Parliament, this is how much you can expect to be paid if you get elected to the Whanokepule. In 2019, the salaries of the Members of Parliament increased from the 2017 increases in the 2019 Civil List amendments, but the allowances remained as was prescribed in the 2017 amendments. The remuneration package of an elected Member of Parliament for 1 year, they will receive $35,959. For the Speaker, the package starts from $42,511 per year. For members assisting a minister, the package is at $51,095. For cabinet ministers, their annual remuneration package is at $62,789 and the Premier's annual package is at $90,785. These remuneration packages for the members of the Whanokepule includes the annual allowances. For the Premier, it's $10,000 every year. For ministers, it's $8,000. The members assisting a minister and the Speaker receive $6,000 allowance per year, and the members of Parliament receive an annual allowance of $4,000. Every 3 years, members of the Whanokepule receive a clothing allowance. The Premier's clothing allowance is $5,000, and ministers and speakers and the members of the Whānau receive $4,000 clothing allowance at the start of every new assembly every 3 years. The overseas travel allowance for the Premier, $500 per day. For the ministers, $350 per day. The Speaker and members of the Whanokepule can claim a $200 per day travel allowance. Meanwhile, the message for the public from the Electoral Office is for people not to leave your voter registration or submission of candidate nomination forms to the last minute. All forms are available right now at the Electoral Office located at the Department of Justice at Fonuakula. BCN News will provide regular information and updates in the lead up to the general elections in our future bulletins.
The Niue High Court has ruled on the application filed by Nisca in May last year against BCN and 2 other respondents, former Nisca executive members Hagen Siosikefu and Christabella Kaukasi-Talangi, which was heard before Judge Sarah Reeves in October last year. Last week, Judge Reeves dismissed the application in its entirety. Here's Esther Bavihi with more.
In May last year, Nisca filed an application asking the court to direct BCN to remove all articles in relation to Nisca and to cease broadcasting the financial matters of Nisca, and for all the 3 respondents to remove the social media posts concerning the financial affairs of Nisca. The national sports body Nisca was represented in court by its president, Maru Talangi, and in their application asked the Niue High Court to direct the BCN and 2 other respondents to make a public apology to the Nisca Executive Committee members, namely Maru Talangi as president, Tony Edwards as Senior Vice President, and Sydney Louis as Vice President and Sports Administration Officer. The case was heard before Judge Sarah Reeves in October of last year. Last week, on the 3rd of April, Judge Sarah Reeves dismissed the Nisca application in its entirety. The decision of the court said that the applicant, Nisca, appears to have confused their own obligation as a decision maker to act fairly with due process with the role of the news media to inform, educate, and entertain the public in relation to matters of public interest. Editorial decisions for these purposes are clearly not subject to the procedural requirements of natural justice, according to the judgment. The court's decision said it was a matter of concern that while the applicant Nisca made a number of serious allegations concerning the other 2 respondents, Hagen Siosikefu and Christabel Kaukasi-Talangi, the grounds pleaded did not disclose any cause of action to support those allegations. In response to the court's decision, Christabella Kaukasi-Talangi said that she is glad this is over because the allegations laid against her at a time when she was undergoing health treatment in New Zealand was a very trying time for her and her family, so she is happy with the court's decision. Hagen Siosikefu said that he is happy with the outcome, but he has mixed feelings, saying, "I'm rather sad because the decision of the courts just further proves the truth of what we have been fighting for, and that the current Nisca administration has been behaving poorly and are doing the sports of Niue a lot of harm, both locally and globally." He continues to say that the allegations and slander that they made against us in this case and throughout 2023 are very serious, and it did cause us a lot of harm. The Broadcasting Corporation was represented in this matter by Government Solicitor General Justin Kamupala. The court has reserved the issue of costs and has given the respondents 10 days to file for costs. Attempts to reach Maru Talangi and Sydney Louis for comments were unsuccessful, but Tony Edwards is prepared to speak to BCN News tomorrow at the Nisca annual general meeting.
NSCA will be holding their annual general meeting tomorrow on Good Friday, the 7th of April. The meeting is scheduled to take place in the morning at 9 a.m., located at the Pacific Way Bar in Amano, Alofing. According to NSCA Vice President Tony Edwards, a total of 13 nominations for all executive positions were submitted by the deadline 22nd of March last month. The Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum, Honorable Henry Puna, spent last week meeting with various groups on the island as part of his high-level visit to Niue to socialize the 2050 Pacific Strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, as approved by the leaders of the Forum countries last year. Our senior reporter Esther Bavihi spoke with Secretary General Henry Puna on Friday last week after his busy week of talks and consultations with the local groups on the island.
Honorable Henry Puna was in Niue with his wife Akaiti Puna, Joel Nilon, acting senior policy advisor and engagement advisor Penisuni Naupoto. They spent a week in consultation meetings with civil society groups, government leaders, private sector and students at USP and Niue High School. Secretary General Puna told BCN News that the voices he heard during the consultations held subtle differences from other Pacific nations, especially around population and capacity challenges. But he also heard optimism of opportunities to come.
Yeah, I think there is a subtle difference between the voices from the Niue communities and the voices from other foreign member states. Because in Niue's case, we all know that Niue is very small, not in land size, by the way. It's much bigger than the Cook Islands combined. But in terms of human resources, Niue is struggling because of the smallness of their population. And so that has an effect on their ability and their capacity to implement some of the plans, I guess, that is much needed in order for Niue to move forward. But we've been privileged to hear from all sectors of the community here. And I think, the overarching message is that Niue has its own unique problems or challenges, and that it requires, special consideration and particular focus when we come to put the implementation plan together. But I'm also pleased to hear that, talking to some of the business leaders, that there is a potential, huge potential here in Niue. And I can only agree because I love coming to Niue. I was here last in 2019, and the optimism now that the borders are reopened and the opportunities have presented themselves, there's a lot of confidence that things can pick up and will pick up.
The 2050 strategy sets out the region's approach to collectively work together to achieve the long-term vision and aspirations of the 2050 strategy through 7 key thematic areas such as political leadership and regionalism, people-centered development, peace and security, resources and economic development, climate change and disasters, ocean and the environment, and technology and connectivity. His visit coincided with the closing of the 17th Legislative Assembly on Wednesday last week, where he was invited to attend and to speak at the after function. Here's what he had to say about parliamentary terms, and perhaps he says it's time for appropriate changes for Niue, reflecting also on his time as Prime Minister of the Cook Islands.
I felt very humbled, to have been invited to witness the closing of the 17th Assembly of Niue, and for the Assembly to be dissolved on that occasion. And to be invited to say a few words at the luncheon was indeed a very high honor for me. So it was good to see, and by the way, your Assembly House is much nicer than the Cook Islands and much newer. And, to sit inside it was really an eye-opener for me. So well done, Niue. But I think, when I talked about growing up, accepting where we are now and who and what we are in the world now, I think it's time to make appropriate changes. I've always believed that, 3-year term of Parliament is not long enough. It doesn't give any government, incoming government, enough time to implement their policies and the actions that they need in order to, to do what they promise for the people of Niue. I know Australia and New Zealand are stuck with 3 years and it will be very difficult for them. But that is no reason for Niue to be stuck with the same term. So my humble suggestion is, to the people of Niue, have a look at 4 years. 5 years is too long, but 4 years, and that's where the Cook Islands is now, is a good term. It allows enough time for any government to perform. Like when I became Prime Minister of the Cook Islands in 2010, my first priority was to ensure that there was continuity of government, stability at the political level. And I'm pleased to say that, I managed to achieve that. And as a result, our country just grew economically and prospered. And unfortunately, when the COVID lockdown occurred, everything just turned to custard. But the world is what it is. It is what we just need to accept it and move on. But for me, it's time that Niue starts looking at its new personality. You're no longer a colony. You are people in your own right. And it's time to move on.
Secretary General Henry Puna spoke of new opportunities for Niue and the Cook Islands and their aspirations to become members of the United Nations, and he spoke of the significant announcement made by US President Joe Biden last year, recognizing the sovereignty of Niue and the Cook Islands.
I'm particularly mindful of the huge recognition accorded to Niue and the Cook Islands by President Biden of the USA last September, when, apart from inviting both countries and along with Tahiti and New Caledonia to the summit, first ever in Washington with Pacific leaders, President Biden also recognized the sovereignty of Niue and the Cook Islands. And for me, that opens a whole lot of opportunities that Niue and the Cook Islands have not had access to before. And so the future is looking great for Niue. And the message is, hey, let's start to take advantage of those opportunities. It can only be good for the country.
The outgoing Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum spoke about leadership and his meeting with the senior students of Niue High School as the future leaders of the country.
I found it symbolic and appropriate that my first meeting and when I arrived here in Niue was with the Premier, the current leader of the country. And my final meeting here in Niue was the future leaders of Niue. And I absolutely loved it. I enjoyed talking to the high school students, the senior students. And congratulations on your daughter being the head prefect, girl prefect of the high school. And it's wonderful talking to her and some other children some other young people, because they already have clear in their minds what they want to do for Niue. So, that attitude needs to be encouraged and to be helped along. So, yeah, I think Niue has a great future. Talking to the young students today, they've accepted that they are the future leaders of Niue. That's the first step. But it's also up to us parents, to encourage our children to move along that path so that they can, in fact, become future leaders of Niue. That was the best engagement for me. And also the meeting with various sectors, including the business community and the civil society organizations. Yeah, that was wonderful. And we're going back, enriched by the sharing that we've had from the Rock of Polynesia. Thank you.
And in other news, Hayden Porter is a familiar face to the locals as the former director of Niue Tourism. Porter is now back with the Niue Tourism Office as a consultant, helping the team led by Director Micah Fuhiniu. He told BCN News that his role this time round is to help build capacity of the office, and with the new director and the new staff brought on to help with the tourism reset post-pandemic.
Hayden Porter is back on the island as a consultant to the Niue Tourism Office, where he used to work as director more than 10 years ago.
Well, firstly, it's a privilege to be back in Niue, and privileged to be asked to help again with the Tourism Reset project. So what I've been asked to do and contracted to do is really assist Micah and the team to develop a work plan, a strategic plan, and deliver outcomes based on that to really reset our tourism industry. And when we looked at that, we've sort of gone back to some basics and making sure that we've got the right product on island, and that is really, our beautiful sea tracks and signage and basic infrastructure that supports the tourism industry. And so the role over the next few months and that is to really make sure that those things are up to scratch. Also to reset our marketing side of things a little bit as well, and just ensure that we're keeping up to date with the latest trends, how we market ourselves, and again, are we marketing to the right people? So my role is really to assist Micah, who's been appointed Director of Tourism, and making sure that she has the capacity to deliver that.
Porter said that question of whether there is sufficient number of rooms and accommodation property available on the island is still an important question. Recalling the same situation when he was Director of Tourism starting in 2010. Recalling the same situation when he was a Director of Tourism starting in 2010. But quality accommodation is also important when it comes to attracting high-paying tourists to the island, something that he is willing to invest in personally.
It's a chicken or egg situation. It sort of takes us back to 2010 when I was here, and it was the first question that we got asked, I think, then. And the answer is, without additional accommodation, you can't get extra capacity, and sometimes that means a short-term gap in terms of return on investment, but a long-term gain. So I would be encouraging investment in growing the capacity of our accommodation sector, because with it comes certainty, and obviously quality is really key as well. So the tourists now, whilst they have different expectations at different level, there's also, that quality expectation as well, and it tends to attract a higher yielding tourist, which is going to spend more when they get here on activities, on restaurants and all the extras that come with it as well. So I'm willing to invest some of my own money in accommodation, and that's always the test. That's always the test for me. So I'd certainly be encouraging people to look at it seriously, and the Tourism Office can obviously help market that, set up booking systems, connections into the travel trade in New Zealand. So I was talking to one of the small accommodation operators recently, and he said he tracks his website every month, and by far and away newisland.com was delivering most of his inquiries and bookings.
Hayden Porter also confirmed that Air New Zealand's second weekly flight, which was supposed to start in September, is now cancelled due to staff shortages at the airlines. But despite the cancellation of the second flight, this provides the opportunity for the local industry to get fitness ready for the new season in 2024.
Yeah, well, there was a note sent out to the industry by Micah last week, which just updated everybody as we were made aware that the proposed short-term second flight, which was about a 6-week window, unfortunately wasn't going to go ahead due to crew shortages and in fact plane shortages, so capacity issues, which obviously was disappointing, but at the same time we want to make sure the industry here was well aware of it, because we also knew that some people were still holding bookings for Saturday arrivals and their customers hadn't been informed yet by Air New Zealand. So combined with Air New Zealand contacting their customers, we wanted to make sure that the industry did as well. So hopefully, in the longer term, that second flight will resume at some point. We've just got to make sure we're ready for it here on island as well, in terms of accommodation capacity, rental car capacity, and again, make sure that our product, which is our natural environment and the tracks and even our restaurants and tours and things are all ready to cope with that extra capacity. So I guess this year's turned out to be a bit of a practice, we'll call it a pre-season fitness test to get a bit match fit, and 2024 needs to be the bigger focus. But short term, outlook's actually really good. There's already strong bookings in place for that traditional tourist season, so I'm sure our operators are still going to do very well over that period. We're reintroducing quite a few of the events just to layer those low and shoulder season impacts where we see lower tourists coming through, and we've also got some quite cool promotions coming up that will support that lower season.
Hayden Porter will be visiting regularly but is based in New Zealand most of the time.
Last month, the Alofi Fitness Group, 5am, and the Tuapa Group Fitness joined together to fundraise in support to help the relief efforts post-Cyclone Gabrielle, which left New Zealand in devastation in February this year. More than 1,000 New Zealand dollars was raised over the past month. The donation was presented to New Zealand High Commissioner Helen Tana, who expressed how grateful she was on behalf of New Zealand for the generous gift to help and support New Zealand in their recovery phase. Here's more on this story. 5am and Tuapa Group Fitness raised a total of 1,130 New Zealand dollars. The donation was gifted to New Zealand High Commissioner Helen Tana early this morning after the 5am Fitness Group held their fitness session at Paliasi Hall. Reverend Nevi Salatielu was present to bless the gift fundraised by the two fitness groups for New Zealand. Helen Tana says she is humbled and grateful for the kind donation fundraised by the two groups.
5am women from Alofi and the Tuapa Group Fitness women from Tuapa joined together to fundraise to support New Zealand after Cyclone Gabrielle. And this morning at the high school at Paliasi, they presented the fundraising to me. And on behalf of the Government of New Zealand, I've thanked them, and we will deposit it into the Prime Minister's Fund in New Zealand that's supporting the communities and the short-term, medium to long-term rebuild after Gabrielle. It was very humbling, and we're very grateful for the support from Niue. As the women said to me this morning, that they decided to fundraise because when there's an event in Niue or in the Pacific, New Zealand is often the first country, or particularly in Niue will be the first country to respond, and they felt the desire to respond back to New Zealand in its time of need.
Ali Hipa of the 5am Fitness Group told BCN News this morning that the fundraising efforts are to show that Niue's support for the many times New Zealand would help and support Niue in times of need.
Our exercise group just meets up every morning at 5:30, and it was one Monday morning, just a few members walking up and down doing some exercise, and we were just discussing how every time something happens to us here in Niue, New Zealand is always there for us. Like as soon as they can, they're on the planes here. There's so much support for us, and we just felt like, they've had the floods, they've had Cyclone Gabrielle, which has hit them very hard this year. We wanted to do something for them. So we were like, okay, let's do 2 exercise sessions. And we asked our TGF group, the Tuapa Fitness Group, if they would like to jump on board, and everyone was very happy to support this cause.
Acknowledgements to 5am and Tuapa Group Fitness for the images used in this story. Per Burmark from Sweden has been helping the Niue government argue its case before the Swedish courts to claim full rights to the high-level .nu domain name for several years. Last week, he was in Niue and spoke to BCN News about the latest development with the Swedish Supreme Court ruling that Niue can proceed to take its case before the Swedish courts. Here's more on this story. Last week, Burmark was back in Niue to consult with the government on the case before the Swedish courts, which which will be heard on the 17th of May. He explained the outcome of the ruling of the Swedish Supreme Court, allowing the Niue case to proceed.
Things are at the moment progressing at a very rapid speed. There has been delay due to COVID and other situations. It's been in the court case is held in Sweden, and there were some question marks that was, of course, used by the opposite side, whether Niue could be in Swedish courts suing a Swedish company, not being part of the Hague Convention and all these multilateral conventions. But the Supreme Court went in and ruled 100% in favor of continue those are procedural questions. So our opponent, they know that their only chance are procedural questions. And according to all international treaties, international law, that they were eligible to be tried in Swedish court. So the material part of the case starts now on the 17th of May. And in that, well, you should never predict things. But I know where we are. The case already consists of 3,000 pages of written material that are condensed by court, of course, because the Supreme Court doesn't try things; they just leave it to the other court to decide. We know that we have an extreme advantage in the material matter. We also have support from ICANN. I've been working in ICANN for 10 years. I just stepped down from the vice chair, so that cannot not be held against us.
Bermak said there is a team of Free working full-time on the Niue case and about 30 other supporters, including legal experts and academics, but he is happy to return to Niue to discuss legal strategies with the government as they will head back to court in Sweden on the 17th of May.
We're preparing for that. And we have some information and discussions with ICANN for technical matters and for other matters. And not least being here, speaking to the government of Niue, informing of what we're doing, specifically if there are some gaps where we have to fill up. It's one thing to sit by Zoom meetings. You don't really get the question. Sometimes the most important questions that might be small because there are a lot of disruptions in Zoom meetings. So it's meeting the government, planning the whole strategy. If they make their input, if they see something that they of course say no, not that way. Okay. And we adjust it and say we do it this way then.
A team of 19 from the Rockvets Niue returned back to the island last week for their usual visit in providing free healthcare services for the animals on the island, especially cats and dogs. BCN News spoke with Rockvets Trust founder earlier this week, who shared that compared to their last visit last year, the clinic has been much more quiet. Today was their last day as they prepare to return back to New Zealand next week. Set up at the old Halamahanga Niue Primary School building, the team over the past week have been de-sexing, administrating surgeries, amputations and overall health checks for the cats and dogs on the island. The team has also provided humane euthanization for dogs and cats with the help and support of the new Animal Welfare Officer for the DAF Department, Kala Ongoton. According to Rockvets Trust founder Sasha Knoll, compared to their last visit to the island last November, it has been much quieter at the clinic this time round.
So last time we did 350 surgeries in October, November last year. I think The good news is that this time we seem to be doing a lot less, which we're hoping is that we've finally made a dent in things, because it doesn't seem that people are too reluctant to bring their pets down. There's definitely still a reluctance in a lot of the male dog owners to bring their boys down. We are still seeing a lot of packs of entire male dogs around, so we'd like to see a few more of those coming in. Maybe just saving the good dogs for breeding and not all the random aggressive ones. And we have made a bit of a dent in some of the ferals this time as well, so we have put down some feral and unwanted cats and dogs as well, which I think is really going to help too.
The issue with the number of feral dogs on the island is still ongoing. Sasha told BCN News that villagers need to take responsibility for keeping their villages safe. Just one aggressive dog can kill a child or elder. A pack of dogs can do much more efficiently.
And we are worried about the safety of tourists and locals as well, and that's what it's about, is keeping the population numbers down, desexing as many of the aggressive dogs and the dogs that we don't want to use for breeding. If you desex a dog, it will be a great hunting dog. They do not stop hunting when they're desexed, so that's obviously a myth that's been spread on the island, that your dog won't hunt if it's desexed, and that's not true at all. And desexed male dog is the same as a desexed female dog. There's no difference in their temperaments or their personalities either.
Today was the Rock Vets' final working day before they leave next week.
Yeah, so I think that we've been trying to work on having some animal laws developed within Niue. There's not a lot of animal welfare laws, just ones that are basic, that just say that you can't beat your dog, you can't throw rocks at it or throw boiling water over it or tie it to things that are going to hurt it, that it's going to drag. I think there was a dog that was tied to a buoy. And teaching the children as well. That's really important, to teach the children that being kind, that reduces aggression. And also these animals are willing to give everything to their owner, to hunt for them, to defend their properties, to look after their families. And if you're mistreating them, which is kicking them, hitting them, screaming at them, that's not really what a dog's life should be about. It should be about being kind, but providing fresh, clean water, providing really good food. I know there's not a lot of food on the island at the moment, but everyone's making do. They're cooking up pasta and putting a bit of dog meat in it, or leftover bones or pork or whatever it might be, So people are managing to get by. We actually haven't seen that many thin dogs on the island.
It is unsure at this time for when the team will return to the island. Follow the Rock Vets Niue Facebook page for more on their work in the past week. Out of the 8 teams for the age groups Year 4 to Year 8, the overall winners for the Whengo Kulosea Ioane Netball Tournament for Rising Stars, which took place last Saturday, went to Alofi Bullets. It was a great day, says Niue Island Netball Association President Carol Edwards. Here's more on this story.
Held in Niue Primary School grounds, the tournament was opened and blessed by Lakepa Ecclesia Pastor Reverend Thomas Kawie. Taking the overall championship title was the Alofi Bullets, who received a trophy and a total prize money of $200, sponsored by the Kulosea Ioane families. Second place went to Hakupu Stars, receiving $150 in prize money. Third prize went to Avasele Purple Tunas with $100, and fourth place went to Tuapa Juniors with $50 prize money. Consultation prizes went to Tongulu, Classics, Likulakepa, and Falekaho. According to Niue Island Netball Association NINA President Carol Edwards, there were no incidents on the day, but only one minor injury. The day was enjoyed by everyone, and Nina thanks all the umpires and helpers that made the day a success. Next on the Nina calendar is the one-day tournament for the adults that is scheduled for Saturday the 22nd of April later this month. Carol says that a Hakupu netball team from New Zealand will also be arriving on the 17th of April this month to participate in the tournament. The team includes an open women's team, men's team, and a mixed team. Acknowledgements to NINA President Carol Edwards for the photos used in this story.
And that concludes our news bulletin for tonight. Do join us again next week for more of our local news. Until then, wishing you all a happy Easter weekend. Good night.